Hi, everyone. Good morning. Happy Monday. Happy midsummer solstice. Happy Ligo. Happy Yanni to my Latvian friends. Uh, solstice was on Saturday night officially, but the big Baltic midsummer festivals, Ligo Yanni, uh, starting starting today. I wanted to do a follow up on some Bitcoin stuff, of course, but I just got back from Prague, and before Prague, I did a video about how things are getting a little bit interesting with the Iranian Russian relationship in light of the U.S. Israel relationship. And people weren't really sure what was going to happen, and it turned out that Trump decided to bomb. In giving my thoughts a little bit here, I'm just going to more focus on Ukraine, but it's related, and we'll look at charts and everything. But I think that this is perhaps a view that only Europeans can understand, but we're talking about global security here. So I hope to get Roman on my show very soon here. You see a U.S. flag, Ukrainian flag, American educated. I believe Trump and Putin have made their own secret Molotov-Ribbentrop pact. There have been at least 5 official calls between them and likely more unofficial ones, most occurring in June, just before the U.S. strike on Iran. I was literally going to talk about this topic today, and he posted this, so it's quite fitting. I'll just read the thread. It's extremely brief. No, they weren't talking about Ukraine. For Trump, Ukraine is an inconvenience, not a priority. So what were they discussing? Only history will tell us, but I believe there was an implicit deal. Putin would stay out of the Iran conflict as long as Trump stayed out of Ukraine. You can see that I liked it there. Quiet pact, no signatures, just like June 1939. We all know what happened after that deal was made. So the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was basically what kicked off the division of Poland and the Baltics and World War II. Happened literally days before Hitler invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939. It's said that either party didn't trust each other, but it was a marriage of convenience. Of course, we know that 2 years later, Hitler betrayed his buddy Stalin and invaded him. But there's not really any angels in this situation. However, again, I will talk about this. If you are going to choose between the Western world, capitalist world, world of the rule of law, I'm not trying to paint broad strokes about everything here. I know that everybody has their problems. Of course, a democratic world like the U.S. has led is better than a corrupt oligarch world that Russia has come up with over the last 100 years, trying to model their communist manifesto with a bunch of peasants on a old German folk-like character like Marx, which was meant for German middle-class type people. Anyway, I digress. I think the proof is in the pudding here with what's happening to Ukraine in light of everything that's happening with Iran. Okay, so let me explain. Let's still focus on Russia here. I posted this over the weekend. Surely Glenn Greenwald will reverse his long-standing polymath claim that Putin's invasion of Ukraine was just a border dispute. As he's always said, in fact, Putin has always wanted all of Ukraine, its sovereignty, its people. Surely he'll make a correction. I was subtweeting ViceGrad24. Great channel if you don't follow them. Okay, Russians and Ukrainians are one people. In that sense, all of Ukraine is ours. He's saying the quiet part out loud. Where the foot of a Russian soldier steps, that is ours. And again, if you hate the United States as much as people do hate the United States, they don't act as imbecilic as this. Okay, yes, they have problems. They know that they can't run a global police, global empire, but they just don't act as stupid as these people. I actually got a response from Vice Grad. Great channel again. Twitter is just hilarious now. They asked me if I wanted to boost this. It's like 1 million followers. You get 4 likes. Funny. Good morning, Roman. Yes, 2 coffees indeed. You can come on as well, my friend. You can come on as well if you'd like. No problem. But yeah, no, I was referring to this Roman. He does great posts about Ukraine. So here's the situation. Putin is desperate for Ukraine. He's desperate to save face. He's on a war economy. He's not going to stop unless he is stopped. It's 3 years now. Anyone is absolutely moronic, especially if you're a Glenn Greenwald type who calls it a border dispute. He's saying the quiet part out loud. But if you are a Israeli, someone on the right, traditional right, I don't even want to say neocon because, look, I said as much on Friday. It's not even my wheelhouse. I'm not involved in anything Middle East. I don't have a stake there. I would say demilitarized Iran is a good thing, but the Israelis are going to do what they're going to do. The United States has joined them. No one knows how this is going to turn out, okay? But what I want to focus on is the Iranian-Russian relationship here, okay? I want to focus on the Iranian-Russian relationship to try to make my point. So let's look at this. Russian casualties in Ukraine, over 1 million now, cumulative. Dead, captured, MIA. Down from Trump's inauguration period, the average of casualties per day, about 1,000. Remember, it was 1,500, 1,600, down from 6 months ago. Russian economy is very weak, but still, that is what it is. As much as the Vatniks try to control the Ukrainian narrative, they still only control about 20% of the country, and now it costs them 9.2 soldiers cumulatively per kilometer to occupy Ukraine. That is casualties. That's not even alive soldiers walking around. This is just casualties. 9.2 Vatniks dead, captured, or MIA to still control 20% of Ukraine. Now here's missiles. I haven't actually shown this. This is missiles, the cumulative number sent into Ukrainian territory. Glide bombs, missiles, 3,300, nearly 3,400. The daily is the black line, okay? Daily average. You see a rough day is 50 to 100. Okay, there's 88 here in December 2023. Great, right around Christmas. Sorry, around New Year's. Just what Russian terror likes to do. Again, you see around the inauguration, really brutal nights for Ukraine. And now is sort of a cluster here, but these are what the numbers look like for missiles. We haven't looked at this. Now let's look at drones. Change the title here. These are actually Iranian drones, even though most are mass produced in Russia. Now, these are Iranian drones. This is the signal of the Ukraine war and perhaps all warfare now. All right. 41,700 drones attacked on Ukraine. The daily average is 150. And that's rising. So again, we're just talking about Russia and Iran now. Let's just look a little bit at the history. Russia really started to take this on in early 2023 with this company, Alabuga, all right, where they would start taking in drones and also producing drones based on the plans. Okay, so this started during the war, all right, to expand their production rate. As you can see, it's been quite successful. But Ukraine has, of course, fought back. Here's one from September 2024. They were also getting ballistic missiles from Iran. September 2024. And then here, they struck a major ammo depot. It said Iranian missiles, Ukraine said Iranian missiles had arrived at the site shortly before the attack. What is this one? Kotluban Arsenal. Okay. We have this as well. Drone saturation. Center for Strategic and International Studies, Russia's Shahed campaign. This just goes through how, obviously this is the signal, not the noise of the war. This is most cost efficient when you're talking about I think they put a dollar amount, $20,000 to $30,000, $20,000 to $50,000 drone attack vector versus obviously millions of dollars for a missile. You'll get a picture like this. So Ukraine is literally absorbing the Iranian drone program. All right. So another in Tatarstan recently, very recently, I think this article, was from June 2025. Damaged more drones. Again, Russia has taken over mostly the production here. They still get some help, as I understand, from the actual motorized mechanisms. Russians are too stupid to produce these things on their own, so they get help still. But then, in response to all of that, what does Ukraine get? Here we have the NATO summit. It's coming up tomorrow, actually, in Holland. Zelensky is invited again, but will not be seated at NATO's table, as opposed to other times during this full invasion. The summit statement is likely to run to around 5 paragraphs on a single page. NATO diplomats and experts say Ukraine will only get a passing mention. So Ukraine is an inconvenience for Trump, just as Roman says here. I've thought this for a long time. I don't know if I've really explicitly stated it enough, but in my opinion, the story of this entire attack, of all the arguments that you're going to see on Twitter or whatever, is the fact that Russia just made a defense pact with Iran in January, and they're doing nothing to stop both the Israeli and U.S. now attacks on the nuclear facilities. One should simply ask the question, why is that? Yes, you could say Russia is sidelined in Ukraine. Again, if it's simply and only that, sort of an Occam's razor type of thing, if you are an Israeli supporting American, if you are sort of a traditional strong defense, center-right, Iran, which says death to America, death to Israel, and the hijab as basically their 3 tenements of civilization. If you're one of these people, then you should be thanking Ukraine. But more importantly, how could it be that we would just sit by and accept this? Ukraine will only get a passing mention. Apparently, Ukraine's security is not still paramount in NATO's or the Northern Hemisphere's security, which to me is just, it's unbelievable. So to me, this is the main actual takeaway of this whole thing. No matter what Putler says about the U.S. attacks, and of course they have, he's condemned them. He's going to say more in the next few days, but he's not doing anything. So, again, if you're a supporter of Israel, or if you're a supporter of what America is doing here, or what Trump is doing, and you're not a supporter of Ukraine, I would certainly want to know why. Obviously, we had this embarrassment last week, Trump at the G7, saying that if Russia was still in the G7 or the G8, this war wouldn't have happened. Of course, completely ignoring the fact that Putin was kicked out. He was sidelined at the lunch table in the G8 for invading sovereign Ukraine, Crimea in 2014. Putin always gets a pass. But yeah, to me, this is the main picture. I don't want to believe this. I think I even commented myself. Can't find it now. I don't want to believe it, but the data seems to be pointing here. Trump doesn't like Ukraine. He doesn't like Zelensky. He doesn't want to talk about Ukraine. And it's really rough, because if you don't stand up to dictators, they're going to keep taking more. And I see no reason why Putin will stop if there is some sort of a deal done, as Roman suggests here. Then, of course, the risk is not just to the heroic Ukrainians, which die every day, but to the rest of Europe. That's all I had with that point. But to me, that's really the most important thing about what's happening here. No one knows what's going to happen with the Ayatollahs or the regime in Iran. Clearly, it's a evil abomination, but it's a huge country that has suffered for 50 years, whatever it is, 45 years. It's going to be up to them internally to stop it if they want. But yeah, probably the U.S. and Israel still aren't aligned. I'm sure Israel would like a full regime change. Trump hasn't said that yet. Who knows? Who knows where it will go? But to me, this is the clear thing. Putin is weak, but still not out of ammo. Plenty of drones, plenty of people, plenty of Vatniks to keep throwing at Ukrainians. And it seems like at least a U.S.-led NATO, like I don't even need to say this anymore, a U.S.-led NATO is completely off the table now. And to me, that just looks like a deal. Iran and Putin signed a defense pact this year in January. It's such a joke. Ukraine might be in the very unfortunate position of having the U.S. as an ally. The only worst thing could be Iran having Russia as an ally. And again, I don't say that defending Iran in any bit. So that's what I see. That's what I see with this whole situation. Let me know if you want to look at anything else there. But this is what Ukrainians are suffering for us. All right, so I did speak at the BTC Prague. Sailor was there. God reincarnate, walking on water, blessing the Bitcoiners that came across his path. It's kind of interesting to see. I did go to a side event, a business event, which heard him speak. Nothing really new. I did hear him say something quite interesting, that he still fears uneducated people that are more powerful than himself. He said something like to that effect, which to me sounds like governments not understanding Bitcoin. So that's the crusade that he's on, is to try to educate governments. But Bitcoin is still going to remain, even though, and this is probably a chart I need to get up soon, retail volume is lower. But we know that that's being made up now with ETF volume and Bitcoin treasury volume and other things. The Bitcoin ecosystem is growing, but it does seem like the retail spot volume is weak. So I think we're actually seeing that difference in price. All right, so we'll see how this run-up's going to be. No one knows until the end, but we didn't have really blow-off tops as you see here in 2021 compared to 2017. Let's say, okay, 2017 was clearly above the 99th percentile. We did not have that in either top in 2021. But what I want to talk about here, and I think it's a very interesting chart that I saw over the weekend from my buddy Sminston with. So you see here again, we've just sort of been trudging along the trend line. Wonderful trend line. It's clearly the trend of Bitcoin, as I talk about. But we didn't have that, obviously, in 2017. We were just sort of under a trend that no one really knew that was around, right? I wasn't following this trend then, not until 2018. And then you can see, like, we just zoomed right above the trend line. Same thing, obviously, in 2013. Of course, that happened, right? In 2013, was a little bit of a support here after the first top in March. And then even here in 2021, we had that strong summer of 2019, but then fell back down. And of course, the virus occurs, throws everybody for a loop. But even here, it's, a few months into the summer, and then next year, zoomed right above it. January, remember the meme coin madness is starting here as well. Not meme coin, but meme stock madness was going on. So we don't have that this cycle. All right, it's very solid. I actually like this word that Sminston used. So this is the chart I want to show you. It's from my friend Sminston with. Let's go through this. Calls it the crab crawl. I think it's very apropos. Been feeling like we're in the longest crab crawl ever. You're actually right, but what he found is it's even a different market than before. Okay, so let's just zoom in and let's look at this analysis. So he's done exponential, which would be straight lines on log linear. Okay, so he's taken exponential for the crab crawls. So the crab crawls is what he calls anything that is basically below a certain percentile. Let me go back and see which one he does. I can't find it, but anyway, you can see basically the boom phases, the bubble phases, or whatever. He's not looking at. He's only doing a slope of the winner phases or the baseline phases. And when you do that, you get this sort of declining exponential, right? Because it can't. It's if you want to, you can shoehorn exponential into Bitcoin, but obviously Bitcoin is not exponential; it's power, right? So normally we get the slope that's like this, but you can still shoehorn exponential in for various periods depending on how you measure it. So he measures this period, and he starts the measurement of the regression here. And you can see, obviously, it just looks normal here for each cycle, right? Including the one before last cycle. Then we have this one. Looks like he catches just the bottom, basically. It's the bottom of the price after the top. So we have this sort of declining slope, but then you have this one is now increasing again. See this one right here? The current cycle that we're in is going higher than the 2020, 2021, 2019, 2021 area, which I think is very interesting. So here he shows you what you would kind of expect is the red dot, but we're actually higher. So I think this is probably a graphical representation of what I just said. I think MicroStrategy, treasury companies, ETFs. That's institutional interest bumping up what retail was usually sick of during these periods. So I think it's a really interesting chart. Good morning, Anders. Good morning. Started early today for once, slightly. So yeah, I'm curious what you guys might think about this, but I think that this is, I'll try to replicate this and get this on my own chart engine, but I think this will tell a very interesting story after the current peak is done. It's a totally different trajectory than the prior, what do you call them, lame duck periods, as he calls them, the crab crawl periods. No change. I think Moon is still end of this year, maybe even a little bit start of next year. But I was just explaining how this chart from Sminston, who does great, he's a great follow, Sminston with, is where he's taking the exponential trend lines of what he's calling the crab crawl period, basically not the boom phases of each prior cycle, and drawing straight lines, so exponential growth. And you see that you would expect that this cycle would again be lower, but it is not. So it's very interesting. And this also might give credence to the idea that this cycle will be different, or it will be just more kind of a following the overall power trend line. Maybe, I don't know. As he concludes as well, it's too early to tell, but it's very interesting that the current slope is higher, or, you know, again, you would expect it to be relatively lower compared to the others. So I do think this is an interesting observation. Morning, Tim. Totally possible. Totally possible. I need to put this on my chart because I like to see it where you can look at the slopes on the, you know, on the tooltip and stuff. The thing is, I don't know how this slope will revert to be lower, as you said, unless we go way lower for a long time. Obviously, nobody wants that. It could happen. And if you go back to this chart, you know, it doesn't seem like it has to happen. We're just on this, you know, extended crab crawl, as he says it. Could also be that, you know, we're actually in the blowout phase. We just haven't seen it yet. And so if he, no, that actually explanation wouldn't work. You know, if he wants to only count maybe this phase right here, you could get a slope like right here, just the worst of it, right after the FTX puking. Then maybe you could get a line that's more analogous to this red line, which would be expected. And then, you know, in the future, once we see the top, we'll see that, okay, actually the boom already started here with the ETF approval, right, which is over a year and a half ago. And then this part would be drawn white. But you also, when you do this many variations from trend, you get into a little bit more of the artsy calculations. You know, like this one looks good. This one looks good. This is an interesting observation, though. I was surprised to see this. Yeah, well, that's always it's always a risk, but I hope and think that you'll be all right as far as being able to cover any loans later this year. If not, I'm sure you can handle the interest if you're doing that strategy. As long as you can handle the interest, it's fine. Or a small margin call. So yeah, as far as Bitcoin goes, um, I'll try to get that chart up next. And then probably the other thing that I think affects this, I mean, I've already mentioned it, but I think it's volume, it's spot volume, it's futures volume, and then it's TradFi volume. We need to sort of graph all three of those things, and I just don't have that data yet. Maybe I need to talk to some data providers to get that all together, but this is where it pays to, I don't know, have some deep pocket data providers, because clearly this thing is starting to look different. We might ask why it is different. To me, it's those things. You got ETFs now, you got treasury companies. We got to somehow aggregate the TradFi volume, which is different than futures volume, which is different than spot volume, which is obviously we didn't have before. We did have futures volume in this cycle, but not in this one or this one. These were only spot and futures. And then obviously spot futures, treasury companies, TradFi, ETFs. So that would be my explanation of why this is higher, but what that means for the future boom, I'm not sure. Yes, good to hear. Good to hear. And I hope you can leverage some gains that way. So that's all I had. Started out with the political, finished up with the Bitcoin. Let me put another video just to show you guys what I was talking about in. Oops. Sorry. All right. So again, this is the channel that I mentioned. It's quite an interesting channel. I posted him on Friday. Just to go back to the conversation for this gentleman, it's obviously about Israel, right? And he had an interesting video where he's talking about how Russia was supporting, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas. So we all know the side that Russia is on. But again, if you just back out where the United States has always stood, generally it's not on the side of imperialism. Generally, it's not going to be. They make terrible mistakes, and he talks about this in this video. We have, depending on which side you're going to talk about, you can talk about World War II or the Korean War. Then you can talk about Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan wars. But at least the U.S. position is never like this. It's never just this stupid, wherever a Russian soldier's footsteps, that is ours. All of Ukraine is ours. Putin is saying the quiet part out loud. So, I think if you're Israeli, you're quite happy. Many people are not happy with potentially getting into a huge drawn-out war. And again, we're going to have to see if that's going to actually happen or not. I can't say I'm a fan of any of these people standing here. Just no real policy or thought out things. Rubio seems like just a torn soul. Especially as a Cuban American. I mean, there's no principled stance there, but they took the decision to strike. So I don't want to rehash everything I did at the beginning of the video for those that just joined, but in my opinion, it still comes down to Russia. The relationship of Russia and Iran here will be the interesting thing to look at. Because as far as I can tell, and Roman put it as well here this morning, this is Ukrainian Roman, seems that there is an implicit deal here, basically. Putin, who just signed a pact with Iran in January, a defense pact, is standing by no matter what he's going to say. He's basically standing by. And the U.S., Trump's U.S., as I said, is sidelining Ukraine on the NATO summit, on everything. It's just more of a hindrance for them. It's an inconvenience. So Russia stays out of Iran, U.S. stays out of Ukraine. What could go wrong? That's what I worry about with this whole situation. But I do like this message again from the video itself from this Israeli tour guide who lived in Germany. Oops. This is not my standard YouTube account, so I get these ads. Anyway, it's a good channel. But coming from the Israeli side, obviously I know that they're quite enthusiastic what's happening. Coming from people that are tired of war, they're not enthusiastic at all. My opinion, again, having no stake in that side, is pay attention to what Russia and Iran are doing vis-a-vis United States and Israel. And for Europeans, they seem to be like the only help for Ukraine. If they would actually step up and, deliver on these promises of sanctions or weapons deliveries or whatever. Because the Ukrainians are the ones that are absorbing these casualties and these Iranian-made drones, even though Russians are making most of them now. Still, all of this was ramped up about here, 2023, as I talked about. I'm rehashing the start of this video now, but Iran was supplying all these Shaheds here from the beginning, a pretty low volume. Now Russia makes these drones to the tune of, 150 a day on average, slamming into Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. But I don't know, guys. That's what I had. People talking about how the price of Bitcoin went down over the last couple of days. This isn't even going to pick it up, I think, because I have, this is latest price to action was the 20th, but it dipped under 99 or $100 or 100,000 yesterday. People are saying, oh, now, it's a risk off trade. And, again, I think risk is pretty high, but, I guess in light of this successful attack, as the United States is calling it, people are saying Bitcoin doesn't need to rise, but my thesis still remains pretty strong. I don't think it has much to do at all with geopolitics. I don't think it has much to do with even the money supply. I think it's comparable to those things. You can make the comparison, but I think it's more has to do with this trend being adopted, and probably we're on a faster adoption trend than prior cycles, like Sminston says here, because of TradFi and the Saylor effect. I do as well. You missed this intro, Anders, but I was basically just going through all the, Iranian, Russian cooperation through the start of this war. They started producing these drones en masse around early 2023. Okay, so it's a year after the war had been going on. And this is modern warfare now. Ukraine is literally showing the world, at 20 to 30,000 or whatever it said, 20 to 50,000 a Shahed. It's way more effective to shoot these at Ukrainians than to shoot missiles, even if they're glide bomb assisted missiles now, because of Russians didn't have to worry about air defense for a long time here, because the Biden admin said you can't shoot into Russia, and then disastrously changed that course right around here. It's all up to Europe. For Ukraine, it is all up to Europe, because I would like someone to prove me wrong here, or to find some information that sort of doesn't portend this very clear outcome, which is that there is some sort of a new Molotov-Ribbentrop pact between the US and Russia. But I don't see that. It's also funny that, of all the world leaders, the largest world leaders that have talked about Bitcoin, these two have, right? So that's going to annoy everybody who's in the liberal world that depends on, or let's say embraces private property and markets and courts. They're going to poo-poo on certainly crypto, obviously, when you got, meme coins issued by the president. But Bitcoin as well is going to be a casualty of bad information coming from these people, and bad faith actions. We do have the Genius Act. I can't remember if I talked about it, how Besant has said that there's going to be like $4 trillion now. Possibility for a demand over the next 10 years of $3.7 trillion worth of stable coins to buy U.S. treasuries. So that's funny. They're going to fight very hard to keep their currency. Obviously, Russia's a trash currency, so they're the junior partner in every way, shape, and form with China. But the U.S. is not going to give up on the dollar. So it's a very unique situation. Well, maybe unique is not the right word, because these are, I think, the way that Roman spelled it out here is interesting parallels with the past. So this Oren from this Traveling Israel said that when he was a tour guide in Germany, even, he would say in his tours, the 20th century could be summed up by three words: God bless America. And if you do think about that, and again, I'm not a warmonger or saying that we need to invade other countries for profit or whatever, or just for every reason, which obviously a lot of these reasons have been proven false, WMD reason. But I think America has given great cover to Europe over the last 80 years. And it's amazing to see now that America is turning back. The one thing that Mearsheimer has correct is that it is anarchy at the nation state level. Like, these guys are never going to The Hague. I mean, Putin Putin's never going to The Hague. George Bush is never going to The Hague. Israeli, for whatever you might think about that situation, again, I have sympathy for the Palestinian people. I have sympathy for the Israeli people. It's a difficult situation, but if there had been real international war crimes at the Israeli level, that's probably not going to be tried. Certainly not going to be tried by any Americans. They're not going to go and stand in front of The Hague. But I just think it's such a low level, high time preference type of a maneuver to try to deal with someone like Vladimir Putin in an effort to solve the Middle East crisis. Which they may or may not solve with these strikes. There's a lot of question marks there. Yeah, I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. I mean, I really think that, this could be the headwind of the next bear in Bitcoin. It's really not going on any data or statistics. It's just going on the idea that, okay, we've had a bunch of people that have screwed up in the past, too much leverage, too much fraud, too much debt, and they get flushed out, whether it's Three Arrows or Genesis or BlockFi or Celsius, or Mt. Gox. Every cycle in Bitcoin has such overwhelming leverage that it's unsustainable. It gets flushed out in the next downturn. What happens when that's like the president? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you got these meme coin, shit coin, wannabe stablecoin generators and entities like World Liberty Financial. What's going to happen when they overdo it in the next downturn? And maybe the answer could be different if Trump is in office versus not in office. But and certainly you're going to find people, you saw the, what was it, the BTCE exchange, that Russian founder, hacker, whatever, was arrested in Greece. And now they're trying to get back his coins. Or maybe they already got him back. Because I believe they got him back. Nation states are going after Bitcoin. And then, of course, nation states are going to leverage Bitcoin. Very interesting. I think we're gone. We're not gone, but we're out of this stage where it's just retail or some hobbyists or some scammers that could lever up and cause problems in Bitcoin. It's now at the nation state level. Yeah, I hope you're right, Tim. I hope you're right. I think it's from a personal sovereignty standpoint, it's probably good to just try to stay away from the big conflicts. Live in Madeira, live in the Caribbean, or perhaps you can be shielded. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the Bitcoin standard will mean, once people really understand this stuff, it will mean less wars. It will mean less bullying. That's the hope. But I also agree that I think it's very far out. We still got to solve this nuclear issue. And we got this 100-year legacy of just communist, despotic, autocratic, terrible regime in Russia that They literally have no democratic values. They have no private property, no free speech. They have shills like Tucker Carlson saying that their country is beautiful with beautiful buildings. The most insane things you could say about a country that it just doesn't understand. I'm gonna start a like a one pager. I'm trying to figure out how to format it. Have a designer friend maybe help me because I might have to get him into some tweets. But after Ukraine, and hopefully there is no after Ukraine as far as war, but you never know. It's going to be Moldova. It's already Georgia is basically under attack right now from Russia. It's going to be Moldova, and then it's going to be the Baltics. We're going to be next. So I'm trying to do. I've talked about this before. You know, like the number of toilets in Russia. You know, tuberculosis, AIDS, viruses, GDP, everything is just so shitty. And then you compare that to the Baltics, which were in the Soviet Union, occupied illegally. Just do a bunch of simple charts that compare those things, and because the propaganda war is only ramping up from their side, and it's going to continue if Ukraine falls or after Ukraine come to some settlement. I don't know how we get there, to be honest. How do we get to the peaceful situation? Because I think it does have to be taken out of the hands of the state, but you know, states still have power. They have power to enforce private property rights for the good, but they also have the power to enforce quite bad things, like the Iranian regime has done. Death to America, death to Israel, and basically hijabs for everybody, for women. That you know are just insane rules that are not the history of that country, or that culture. You know, you can still, let me pull up the debt chart. You can still borrow money as a government and not print money. So I think that is also something that people don't take into account when they talk about like the future utopian Bitcoin world. Yeah, I mean, it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time. Let me show you this again. Is this one? I need to draw some of these charts before I. This is not probably the best one. Just really quick. Here it is. Okay, so this is the fiscal. We talked about this, but this is the fiscal situation of the U.S. There's a lot of stuff on here, but all right. So remember, the balance is here. So over time, the Fed had basically they own no treasuries. It was mostly J.P. Morgan financing, you know, World War One. This was quite a high, 16, 17 cents on the dollar was treasury paper owned by the Fed in the height of Vietnam. And this was the TARP and TALF. This was the corporate bailouts of the Wall Street crisis. QE 123 down, tried to get it up, and then the virus, and then down again. So 18 cents on the dollar is what the Fed owns at the moment. But you can also look at how this print works over time. Okay, so here we go. This is the black line is the cumulative of the green. The green is the action, all right? And it's a trailing 12 months, so it's more understandable. Trailing 12 months is the best way to look at this. So this is the print, and then let me show you the deficit. So if you want to talk about what Bitcoin does or solves, in my opinion, it really only solves the green. Now everything can change from that, but still, I mean, they're the ones that control the military planes. They're the ones that control the button. I mean, there's this joke with who's Dave Chappelle's buddy? I forget. He's got glasses. Funny dude. He was one of his writers on the Chappelle Show. And he's like, if you had a modern day contest between the old, don't tread on me folks that have their guns versus the government with drones, that contest would be over pretty quick. Even though we're talking about the government not treading on me. Again, I'm not making excuses for the government. I'm just saying, you could have all the guns in the world. You can be in your bunker. You could have a contest between just like one nationalist gun owner versus one member of the government who has like a drone. And he does a whole bit about it. He's like, well, they do interviews in the morning of this contest. It's like a reality show, right? And the gun owning, don't tread on me patriot says, I'm going to take this guy out. I got all my guns. I got my water. I got my ammo. And then the government guy's just like, well, I have this drone here. I'm just going to press the button. And you kind of see where it's going as far as who has the power. Again, I'm not saying this is good. I'm not saying it shouldn't be taken away or limited. But things are way out of whack. But anyway, as far as the deficit goes and what the government spends, they borrow the red. And they only print or cover some of the red in certain times with the green. So the green is what Bitcoin solves. It's better money that can't be printed. But you can still borrow money without being a printer. Or you can borrow money in Bitcoin. But they're going to keep the dollar for sure, and they have the guns. So it's really only this green part, in my opinion, that Bitcoin solves. The red part is still huge, and it's still going to go on. And obviously the green part, they never know what they're doing. They're always way out of whack. So here you see they were trying to destroy money. When this green is negative, they're destroying money. But when the deficits are so high and the government can't finance it with borrowing in the public market, they need the money printer. So that's where you get the green mountains. And again, all this time, the government was trying, all the way to COVID, the government was trying to destroy money. Negative, negative, negative here. Still had deficits. Still borrowed money in the marketplace, the federal government. But the Fed, the central bank, was destroying money here. And then obviously all that went away during the pandemic. Just massive money printing. Now they're trying to destroy it again, although they're decreasing the rate of money destruction. So it's a long-winded way of my opinion on this topic, which is not like black and white, not very utopian. I'm pretty sure all this is still going to be going on after we've left this earth. This is 110 years of data here, just for the United States. The theory is that the money will be so powerful that it will restrain even deficit spending. It might do some of that, but again, they have the authority. They have the guns. And when I say guns, I mean like the big guns, the drones. Yeah, it's Neil Brennan. Neil Brennan is the bit that I was talking about. of the don't tread on me patriot versus a government worker. You could just do a reality show of the theory of if government will. Anyway, we might see more of that in action in Iran in the few next coming weeks because, maybe. I think the United States is really holding back. The Israelis, of course, would like a major regime change. The United States is holding back at the moment, ready to bring the current regime to the negotiating table. I'm sure a lot of free young Iranians want freedom from that regime, but that's a huge regime that also has a lot of guns, also has a lot of power, also has a lot of mad philosophy behind them. So we're going to see how that plays out. If the masses will take down their corrupt leaders. And by the way, I'm not saying that the United States is in the same situation. Again, if you compare everything, if you compare, the United States does not talk about its enemies like this. Just this delusional, xenophobic, nationalistic, fake historical connecting of the dots, like Putin did with the Tucker interview of, this Rurik fellow from 1,000 years ago. It's just nonsense. He's saying the quiet part out loud. He's saying all of Ukraine is ours. Glenn Greenwald calls it a border dispute. It could. It could. Am I defending that? No. Definitely not defending it. Could it happen? Yes. Let me go back to the chart. Why did I just lose it? Here it is. I don't think I have a Debt-to-GDP. I should have that one handy, but give me a second. I have it in another window. Let me open it. In my Flourish charts. Anyway, like, you could take a snapshot here, Tim, in my opinion. Like, you could take a snapshot just right here. The Vietnam War ended. World War II was also over and had come way down. This is now cents on the dollar, right, that they're paying. Okay, and the printing is actually relatively small over this time period. Like, the Fed likes to say that it was practice during the Great Depression. It was, it was a bit crazy. All this stuff was practice. The Fed was getting started, the Roaring 20s. Look, they paid down deficits here, by the way, and they paid down debt, I should say. When the deficit, this is a kind of a weird chart, but when the deficit is negative on this chart, debt is paid down. Just like when the green is negative, money is destroyed. And so but this is obviously just crazy moves here, over 100 cents on the dollar. But when we get to here, and then going all the way to, say, here in the mid-70s, you could say things were pretty crazy. And then plus, obviously, they went off gold right here. Like, people would be really scared. And gold was going to $800 an ounce. Newsletters. This was like the birth of newsletters. You guys know I'm on this kick of just debasing newsletters because they give you a lot of words, filler words with hope and fear and no substance. Whereas I give you great charts for free. But I mean, imagine the fear that was going on here in the 70s. And then, well, we could actually even have more deficits. People would buy our debt all over the world, all through the 80s, all through the 90s, relatively little money printing. And of course, they still screwed it up. More deficits here, low interest rates after 9/11, bubbles in real estate. they screwed up here, they screwed up during COVID, but obviously no one knows the breaking point is the point, but they could definitely do it. All right, let me pull up the flourish chart because I have some better GDP charts. But I think that gives, to me, actually, the framing of all this stuff this way is more comfort to Bitcoin, right? You could also frame Bitcoin as a panacea that solves, everything, as a lot of Bitcoiners do. But I just think that completely ignores like reality and how the stuff looks normally. Where is the debt to GDP? Here we go. Okay, here. Sorry, gotta switch to this. I gotta smooth out my workflow here. I'm sorry. It's too many. Too many different windows. All right, here. Pull this out more. All right, it's coming. Here we go. And here. Okay, so just to answer your question, Tim, again, some basic stuff. It's not like this is not super, detailed, but I don't have Japan on here, but we have the big ones. China is huge, obviously. Very close. I think it was 140% was the top. This is 132, as you can see. In World War II, I don't have it back on this chart, but this is World Bank, IMF. I got to get individual nation data to get it back further, but this is just conglomerate data. That all starts in 1960 as the earliest date. Anyway, yes, the United States is in the worst position, but is the United States like the worst economy in the world? Is it the worst, is it the worst militarily equipped in the world? Is it the worst democratically in the world? Maybe. I don't know. At the moment, might have some democratic issues for sure. That's what scares me the most about the United States is lack of democracy. But obviously, Ukraine fighting for their lives. They're at 107. China's an autocracy, 94%. Western Europe, blended, 89%, very high. Although we have very small amounts of defense relative to Western defense, we're very underlevered, so to speak, compared to the U.S. and non-NATO. And then look at Russia; they're even better. But then on the other hand, Russia's such a shitty country and a shitty currency. No one wants to buy Russian bonds. So that's another reason why they're not actually indebted in this version. Also, you probably have seen the stories. Russia is indebting the corporate sector, which is not included in this chart. So they're forcing companies to pay for their military expenditures, basically. So that's the story that's happening with Russia. But anyway, the point again, why I think we show this is like people live their lives. This is multiple generations. Yes, we're all higher than we probably ideally should be. Not excusing it. A lot of wars breaking out. Certainly not good. If you look at when 9/11 happened. Sorry. Generally, we're... sorry. My mouse, I realized, was on a different screen. Let's take off Russia. So if you look at around 9/11, Western Europe had the most debt. U.S. only 53%. Certainly, everybody way lower. It does not look good for the Western world from this perspective. But if I threw Japan on there, like you said, gets up to 250%, it can happen. I mean, it can function that way. It's a terrible way to do it. It's not good. Shouldn't do it. But it can. You can kick the can down the road a lot longer than you would expect. Another interesting thing, which again, I'm not quite sure how to describe this, but like, think about like my education into sort of the libertarian free market, eventually finding Bitcoin world. It was through a lot of newsletters, so I shouldn't poo-poo them too much, but it was the global financial crisis, right? It was 2008. How could everybody be so wrong at the same time? It's not like if you look back in the grand scheme, this looks so terrible, right? Like Eastern Europe was even better debt to GDP, down like, to 35% blended, okay? Western Europe's a little bit higher. Yeah, you could say all these figures were way higher than they were in 1980, and that's true. But it's not like you look at this chart and you see, okay, this is a reason why there was a crisis, right? You can't really tell that. Similarly, like all these jumps right here were because of the virus. No one could have predicted that in 2019. This is where I just think economists are just obviously full of it, as well as newsletter writers. Even though I like to show these things, I like to always just put the caveat that, I don't think there's any hidden secrets here. I mean, how many times have you read an article that just says it's over, the world is ending, U.S. is on track to become like Japan or whatever? I mean, yeah, it's bad. They need to work it out. They need to be more productive, cut costs, have more transparent government. They need all those things, but nobody watching this video can solve that. Certainly myself, I can't solve it. So from all that perspective, I think we all arrive at the same conclusion. Bitcoin is a great asset, but I wouldn't even if it was only like from the selfish perspective, right? Let's say if it was only, and this is from a Western European's perspective, like Russia decides to put this, every Russian boot on a prior that landed on some meter of soil is Russia's. So they try to take the Baltics in 2 or 3 years. If NATO wanted to defend us, which at least the obligation is theoretically there, NATO could still blip up. Generally, the U.S., NATO, Western European NATO even only could blip up their debt to GDP higher, and then it could come back down. And in my view, that would be a completely just war, at least to defend us and kick Russian invaders off our soil, just like Ukraine is fighting a just war. Although we're not really helping them as much as we could to kick Russian invaders off their soil, we're still helping them a lot. Anyway, I'm probably on a soapbox and rambling about the stuff, but I don't really see these like broad economic figures as anything to ride home about. Like if you didn't know the context of this 20% Russia debt to GDP, oh, Russia's in great shape. They're awesome. When really no one wants to hold their shitty currency. They have a dictator. There's no private property. 1 in 5 Russians doesn't have a toilet. And they can't even take a country which they says is theirs because they, because they occupied it 35 years ago. And they can't even take 20% of the country. So there's a lot of nuance in these pictures and these broad strokes of like debt to GDP, I think. Broad conclusion, yes, it's not good overall. Bitcoin helps. Bitcoin does help, but it's like Brennan says. I mean, they have the guns, they have the drones. You got to work through this. it would be a damn shame if, say, the Ayatollahs fall and Iran goes back to its normal democratic 1960s, 1970s lifestyle. Define democracy how you want there, but at least women can be out in public uncovered. It would be ironic, and Israel can now sleep better and not feel like there's a nation that just wants to wipe them off the map. It would be ironic if the U.S. helps all of that situation happen, but then doesn't help Ukraine at all continue to fight for its sovereignty, and then Putin is the one that pulls out that tactical nuke or tactical nuke or some major strike, and then forces everybody to back off. And then that's how we spend the next 50 years. Probably too much on my soapbox for some people. I try to balance all of it, but those are my thoughts. Remember, this is cents on the dollar, so. And also, here's another thing. I talked about this before, but here's now the interest. This shouldn't be a solid line because it looks more confusing, but let's take the print off. So this is the interest on every dollar. So let's describe this again. The red line, remember, it's the deficit on a dollar tax. So if you, at this point, March 1992, from March 1991 to March 1992, they took in $1 tax, spent $1 tax, and spent 39 cents more. That's what this shows, right? So if it's negative in this chart, it's a good thing. It's paying down debt. But usually it's adding to debt. What is the cost of that debt, the interest? It's actually not historically high. Okay, let's even take this off just to show this. This is just the cost of the debt to the federal government. During the Depression, great years, it got up to 60 cents on the dollar of tax received. Okay. Now it's only 22 cents. Again, not defending it, not saying it's amazing. It's certainly above the here's the average. We're now above the all-time average. It's 20 cents on the dollar. But it's not 30 cents. It's not 60 cents. Dollar's still the world's reserve currency. The U.S. government still benefits from the Cantillon effect, where they can spend the money first before it gets devalued later across the economy. Anyway, I guess in terms of Bitcoin, if we want to just talk about Bitcoin itself, so this is now the balance of debt that the Fed holds. So this is really the brass tacks number. Okay, so remember, it's coming down. Interest rates are up. This is coming down. I think if this really starts to go up, right, it's 18 cents on the dollar. Let's even take off the interest. And what's the trend here, which is not a great trend? We're way under trend, right? If you look at the 100-year trend, we are under it. Fed is being responsible. Trump is pissed. Trump wants them to raise interest rates. So Bitcoin will really have a jet fuel, I guess, behind it once this starts to tick up. But like I said, the power trend is more important, and we're right on power trend. So as a Bitcoiner, if you're not over-levered, I would say not too much to worry about. As a citizen of Europe, if you live in Eastern Europe, probably a little bit more nervous. What do you think? Any other questions? Did I meander through enough topics there today? I do hope to get Roman on. I've been in touch with him, and this is honestly the um, exact topic I wanted to talk about today. Anyway, we can't influence the Federal Reserve. We can only, every 4 years, if you're American, well, every 2 years, really affect policy. Maybe if you're in a really tyrannical regime and the entire populace rises up, you can affect certain tyrannical governments. For all the rest, just hold Bitcoin. The trend is about 130K by the end of the year, start of the next year. And remember, I said probably to number 5 there, or even 4. No, actually 6. I mean, 6 would be like very top, but getting up to 3x in my view is the highest. Okay, so that's number 6. If you look at the tooltip, 360,000. Let's go back to December. You see it's very sensitive. Number 6 now is 350,000 end of December. To me, that would be a max. All right, guys. Unless anybody wants to look at another chart, I'm going to call it for a day. And be back with you tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Hope you guys have a great week and a happy midsummer. Happy Ligo, happy Yanyi, happy midsummer. Thanks, Tim. Bye.